Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome to this episode of Transitioning Tools for Transitioning Humanitarians. I'm your host, Asela Monova, and today I want to talk about three mistakes to avoid when going through a crisis. And I have been talking a bit more about crisis and how many of us humanitarians are going through this, and we feel like, oh my God, this is the worst that could ever happen. What's going on, and all of this panic, or a lot of this fear, a lot of how things are not the way we thought it would be, and therefore, like one crisis after the other and crisis after the other, and then it just feels like I don't know what to do and what not to do, and that feeling, and therefore I wanted to really help you address not to do certain things, and I think that's such an energy saver, time saver, emotional state that you can avoid, that you don't want it to be in, and focus on what matters. And that's why I wanted to dive into three mistakes that I have done so many times over and over. And I have at some point decided that I need to have my own protocol, so to say, as to what are the things not to do anymore. And I'm hoping that that will be helpful for you as you're going through this. So I don't think that I need to really talk about why these are necessary, but maybe still to get you really looking at why like this is essential not to do, basically, right? So why avoid these mistakes? And one of the first reason is I feel like as humanitarians, we're already so prone to going to emergency situations, right? We are familiar with emergencies, we're familiar with war zones, we're familiar with hazardous situations. We have worked in there, or maybe we have heard about it, whatever it is, or maybe we have served the refugees or displaced communities. So therefore, this crisis in general, or whatever the crisis is not really unfamiliar to us, right? So in other words, we have in some shape or form have heard or been in or dealt with a lot of the time. And I feel like if we now get so surprised and powerless in such situations, even though it's of course very surprising. But if we keep feeling powerless about the situation, then what we're not going to do is we're not going to rely on all the wisdom and experience and expertise that we already have to focus on what matters, right? And therefore, when it comes to our own journeys, or when it comes to our own careers, when it comes to our own professions and it disappearing or it's being at risk, of course, it affects us a lot differently than when we are serving other people. But I really wanted to bring to your attention as to how we can still continue focusing on what matters instead of just staying in powerlessness, fear, panic, anxiety, worry, doubt, hesitation, disappointment, feeling punished, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, whatever it is. And those are the type of emotions that will not let us go to the direction that we want to or we need to in probably many of the cases. So that's why I would say that's like the number one reason why we need to not do these three things. So the first thing is I think something that many of us do, and I have done this, like as I said, millions of times. And at some point, I said, okay, enough is enough. I can't do this anymore. And that is resisting. And this is something that is so fascinating how no matter how many times we have gone through crisis, we somehow end up feeling resistant of the current situation. Or another way of saying it is being in denial might be as well, right? So the way that resisting shows up in our lives might be something like, I can't believe this is happening. This shouldn't have happened. This is not how it was supposed to go. This is not how they should have shut down. This is not how I should have just lost my job. This is unfair, right? All of this are in the resistance category. Now, I don't even need to tell you this as to how that type of thinking affects us, right? The way that it affects me, and I'm assuming that you have a similar experience, is that when I'm in resistance, what I end up doing is I end up mostly complaining, bitching about things, hating on people, hating everyone, or blaming everyone, or all the system, or whatever it is that I want to blame. And then what I'm actually not doing is actually doing the things that gets me out of this crisis situation, right? And that's exactly the point because of which we are having all of these emotions. So if we don't want those emotions to continue, and if we don't want those emotions to grow, because resistance makes us grow them, then what we want to do is actually get down to, okay, what is it that I want to focus on? What is within my control? And where do I want to go next after having processed all of these emotions, right? So in times of resistance, the or in times of like first hearing the news, excuse me, and hearing what's happening, the way that I have currently like trained myself is that the first few hours I already have processed things, and then went to accepting whatever it is for what it is. It doesn't mean I agree with it. It doesn't mean that I approve of it. It just means this is the factual situation and the circumstance, and how do I want to deal with it is always up to me. And I come to the other side. And I'm not suggesting that that's what you should do, but I'm just suggesting this is available to all of us. Because what resistance also does is resistance removes our agency, meaning that we just feel so powerless all of a sudden, and we feel like we're fighting against this gigantic system, which is true, except that if we keep focusing on how gigantic it is, how hateful it is, how we blame everything on them, how this and how that, nothing is going to change in our reality, and we know that, right? So therefore, am I going to focus on that gigantic thing that I blame or hate and all of those things? Or am I going to focus on, okay, what am I going to do in the current circumstances? So once I process and accept the situation, then I start looking at, okay, having the agency of what to do and how to handle the situation, right? And therefore, I really want to build that agency to know that I'm always in charge of how to react to whatever the situation is, right? I'm always in charge, no matter what the circumstances is, I'm always in charge of what to do and how to move forward, because that's something that no one can take away from me. They may take away my job, they may take away my titles, my achievements, my expertise, or not expertise, they can't obviously, but they may take away all of the accolades or whatever it is that they're trying to take away. They can't do that. But what they cannot take away is my agency to decide what to do, how to handle, how to move forward, where to move forward to, and what to focus on is totally up to me, right? So therefore, this is, I would say, the first thing I do in times of crisis. Now, the the reason I believe that this will be such a game changer for everyone listening is if we feel like coming out of the crisis, feeling so powerful, feeling like we didn't let the circumstances dictate what we can and cannot do, where we can go or cannot go, whatever it is, if we were able to do that, then there is no other crisis that can affect us, right? There is no other crisis that can affect us badly because we have shown to ourselves how we have handled it now in this crisis. And therefore, I think it's such an important point for our body memory that restores these memories of how we have handled each difficult situation, right? And the next one, we keep fearing of it. But if our bodily memory preserves the memory of how we have handled it powerfully, how we have not allowed this situation derail us from going for what we want to, we have finally used it as a way to go exactly for what we want to, no matter what the situation is. So, for instance, I have a client who is now wanting to really focus on her family and her building a family because she wants to resign, even though she had no reason to do that. I mean, except that she really felt like she doesn't want to tolerate toxic environments anymore, right? And therefore, like in times of crisis where everyone is saying, hold on to your job, don't leave, you will be miserable if you do, whatever it is, despite all of this, she decided, hell with it, life is too short. I don't want to be putting up with toxic environment anymore. I don't want to do any of these things. I don't care. I'm gonna be my own boss and do whatever I want to and focus on the family that's the most important, and everything else I will decide how to handle it. Right now, that is a powerful decision. Now, of course, some people may say it if it's a very reckless decision. And if you are thinking this is a very reckless decision, notice that this is a judgment coming from a fearful place as well. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't judge or you shouldn't have fear, but I just really want you to notice that this is coming from a fearful place, because if we're forcing ourselves to hold on to the job we don't want to, just because we are in times of crisis means literally that we're so afraid. And that also means that we're not really trusting ourselves or our abilities to go for what we want and make the impact we want to. And as much as we may try to do that, and this is the other example, is that I have another client who's telling me that she kept in the previous crisis, I don't remember which crisis she was talking about. In the previous crisis, she also said, okay, I need to hold on to this job. I cannot let go of it, or like everyone is searching for a job, so I will be foolish to let go of this job, and then kept going for assignment. And finally, when she went to a family duty station, then her job was reduced because of the current crisis. Right? So, in other words, she was so afraid of the previous crisis, and now she's compiling another evidence of how she cannot handle this crisis, because last time she tried to avoid it by holding on to the job that she actually didn't want to, and she wanted to leave, but she decided not to. And now it's happening again, as if to say, okay, this is as if to say that you really need to confront the crisis and do something about it, right? And that's the thing with crisis, is that however the way we handle it the first time, the second time it will be similar. If we handle it the first time with so much powerfulness, with so much confidence and agency as to how we want to handle and go through it, the next one will be even better version of it. But if we're gonna do this worse, meaning that, oh my God, let's not like let the crisis not touch me. Let me avoid it at any cost. Let me just hold on to it, even though I wanted to leave already like years ago, but now is clearly not a good time. And then hold on to it, and then feeling like even more fearful, and then seeing how your job is being reduced again, and then you just feeling even more devastated and feeling like, okay, now is the time I have to now confront it. But oftentimes, what we then end up doing is instead of confronting what's the reality currently, what we end up doing it either resisting it so much, avoiding it so much, or trying to hold on to something else and trying to compete with so many other people for the job that we don't even want to. And then when we don't get it, we just feel even further devastated, and we create so much of the problems that way. Right? So that's why how not to resist and how to go through this as powerfully, at least having your agency to decide how to go through this, is a crucial body memory that you can teach your body. So next time you get stronger. The next mistake that I have committed so many times, and I would love to like suggest to avoid, is keep reading about this on the news. And this is something that I have done so many times when my country went through conflict in 2005. And then the several revolutions in my country where the people were ousting the residing president. And then the crisis in Ukraine when I was working, and of course, 2022 invasion where I was just like nonstop obsessively reading about the news every second refreshing and reading to a point that it crippled me so much, it paralyzed me so much that I was not functioning at all for days. And not only I was not functioning, but then when my boyfriend at the time was going to Ukraine, I was even more devastated that I just felt like the need to go after him and need to go and be with my friends. And of course, these were amazing reasons for me to go to Ukraine, the country that I love. But at the same time, knowing and noticing after having survived two explosions, noticing that I was just not useful at all in any shape or form for anyone when I'm paralyzed and emotionally wrecked. And again, I'm not advocating for us to function the whole time and being useful the whole time and all of these things. Don't get me wrong. And I think there's always time and place for spending time with our emotions, spending time with whatever is going on and grief and all of this, right? Absolutely. But even after that, what tends to happen oftentimes is that we get so obsessed about it, is that we just continuously make the news be the powerful, dominant factor of our lives. And then everything around us, everything else becomes secondary, and we keep suffering from every news that we read. And then what happens then is that we keep justifying to ourselves that we can't just not read the news, obviously, right? That's how we justify to ourselves. And then we also say that if we're not reading, we feel guilty or ignorant and all of these things. And again, I have gone through all of those except to find on the other side is that we're not doing any good to anyone, to ourselves, and then all we're doing is harming ourselves. And that's why my rule is now that whatever the crisis is, the news that I will be reading needs to be purposeful, meaning that I will just not sit and obsessively read everything I can get hold on to or like get every detail and every information every second and just keep like scrolling my phone or watching on the news. I don't do that anymore. Instead, my protocol is okay, if I'm reading the news, it needs to have a purpose, meaning, what am I going to do with this information? Am I going to use it to support someone in my circle, my friends, whoever it is? Am I going to use it to find out if my friends are okay? Or am I going to use it now currently to support my clients in the best way I can? What is the purpose of me doing it, right? And knowing that purpose and constraining my focus on what I will get or what news I will read and how long I give myself to read, and that's it, and then I leave. Some of the times I don't even read the news, but if I do read, it needs to have a purpose. And the other thing is, what am I going to do with that information instead of just hogging that information and not doing anything, but just keep generating hate, generating blame, generating anger, generating all the negativity, which the world does not need one more person of doing it, I'm sure. That's my at least explanation, right? So I don't want to be another person hating on everyone else or hating on those people or whatever it is that's going on because in the end you need to imagine that all of that emotions are coming through my body and I always think of it like the I don't know, the dirt or the trash that I will just compiling and compiling in my body, especially when I decide to hate other people or hate certain things. And why would I do that? I don't want to do that. Right. So that's why whenever my brain wants me to read the news, either I get purposeful of why I'm reading it and what am I going to use it for, or I'm going to be focused on, okay, what is within my control of whatever the things happening and what can I do about it, right? Of all the things that's going on, what is within my control and what can I do about it? So, for instance, in this crisis, when the Trump administration made this order of stop work order, right? And a lot of humanitarians reached out to me and said that, oh my God, we're in this situation. Is there anything that you can support us with? And then I was like, okay, my time best served is support them and give them free coaching, which I did and I'm doing now currently as well. And I had a lot of people come in to write to me and wanting support, and I thought, okay, I will dedicate my time doing that instead of obsessing with the news. Now, the third thing is the dramatization, and this is something that I believe we all react to in the beginning, especially, and that's, I think, very like human, normal reaction probably for most of us. Now, what I also notice is that that dramatization, excuse me, tends to continue for a long time and tends to keep impacting us for a long time unless we're not careful about it. So that's why after having gone through so many crises of my life, I just felt like, okay, there needs to be a time in your life at some point that you learn the lessons of the past and don't do the things that you don't like doing anymore, right? And that was really like my revelation of like, okay, I don't want to be doing the same things over and over again, especially if I'm supposed to be learning from the crisis. So one thing at least I can learn is really learn how not to dramatize anymore. And I mean, believe me, I used to be, I think, one of the worst people when it comes to dramatizing and exaggerating to a point that I was like, oh my God, I need to even factually check if that's true. And nowadays, I'm very careful as to how my brain wants to dramatize and how to stop it from dramatizing. Because the reason is very simple. It has no purpose. The only way it will continue entertaining me is if I keep using it to exacerbate and make my situation worse, which I do not want to do, right? And I'm assuming you either. So therefore, if we're not wanting to do this exacerbation of the situation and making things so huge or so unbearable or so unattainable, unovercomable, whatever it is, then why would we do that? Because what you will notice probably from your own experience as well is that the more we hype it up, more we make it a high stake and oh my God, it has to work now. It can't work any other way. If it doesn't work and fail, I'm doom and gloom. If we do that, do you think we're going to sit down and work on the things that are important to us? Absolutely not. What we're going to do is instead is just keep distracting ourselves so that we don't do the thing that is high stake and then fail at it. Because whatever the thing that we've made it so high stake, high pressure, we immediately get afraid that it will be a failure, will fail, and then we don't want to face the consequences. So therefore, why even attempt it? And what we end up doing is we keep distracting ourselves with everything else except actually doing the thing that will maybe get us a job, that will maybe get us transition to something else, that will maybe get us to not working with other people, that will maybe get us to revising our CV. We don't do any of those things. Now notice what happens then, right? So that's why it's such an important point as to noticing and observing yourself. When are you dramatizing and what are the ways you tend to dramatize and how to stop that? So here is my example of how I tend to dramatize and how I need to watch out for. So the way that I would dramatize is I would say things like generalized big statements like, I hate humanity, I hate all the leaders, or I hate this thing or that system, or everything is bad, everything should be burned down. Uh, I can't believe that we've been tolerating this forever. All of this are obviously generalized BS statements that just hype me up and do nothing in terms of actually getting constructive. So therefore, when I notice myself do this in my head or out loud, I then like calm myself, right? So I need to get to my calm, grounded place and then look at the situation, whatever that is, factually. So factually looking at the situation would be, for instance, is somewhere I read is that suspending the US aid would be suspending 43% of the world's humanitarian aid. Now that is factual, right? And of course, my brain immediately goes into, oh my God, that's a lot of money, or that's a big percentage, that's a big dependence. Again, I notice that I am now putting my own judgment onto it, which is not factual, right? So that's another dramatization, might be. What I do then is I understand, why am I doing this, right? Where am I going with this? By dramatizing, what is the purpose? Like, what am I achieving by dramatizing? Am I trying to prove to someone how desperate my situation is? Or am I trying to prove to someone that how everything is bad and gloom and doom? Why? Why am I trying to do that? And then the uncovering of this comes with something like, because I'm just so sad, right? Or because I'm just so grieving, or because I'm just so afraid. And that is the core of what we need to sit with. Yes, it's very scary. Yes, it's very difficult to go through this. It's very grieving. It's very hurtful, whatever the emotion is. Let's stay with that. Let's allow those emotions to come to the surface instead of covering it with all of this dramatization. And once we recognize that, okay, acknowledge that, and then we can look at, what are we going to do now? And in such situations, I always ask myself, how do I want to go through this crisis where I become the person I really, really want to become? Like, for instance, I want to become a powerful person. I want to become a powerful leader. I want to become a fearless humanitarian. And this is a good opportunity for me to show to myself that I can do that. And if I can do that, and if I can be that person, how is a powerful, fearless humanitarian handle such situation? Maybe some of the answers might be, well, I focus on how best to support my clients in my case, right? Maybe it is, how else can I support them? What else can I help them with in such situations? What other specific questions they might be having that I can answer? Whatever it is, I will then come up with some ways to show to myself that I am the person who can go through this powerfully, with agency, in a fearless way, instead of indulging in resistance, in obsessive reading of the news, instead of dramatizing everything and exacerbating the situation. So, my dears, if you are going through this, I am very sorry for this, or you going through this, and I would love to help you. So, unfortunately, I don't have free coaching spots left anymore because it was just like in influx. But I still have some individual coaching left. So, if you'd like to come coach with me, I would love that. Message me on social media or email me at sl@complaintfree.life. Of course, you can also go to my website, asalurmonova.com, to book a call immediately. Have a beautiful week, and I'll talk to you very soon.